Chapter 1, Vows and Lies. The ballroom glittered like a dream. Chandeliers rained soft golden light over rows of white roses and champagne flutes. Music floated like silk through the air, and every corner of the grand estate whispered wealth, elegance, perfection. Selene Reyes stood at the center of it all, lace and diamonds clinging to her like second skin. Her veil, now pushed back, shimmered in candlelight. The weight of the day pressed against her spine, but her smile was a portrait of serenity. Everyone said she looked like the happiest bride in the world. She'd rehearsed that look for months. To her left, Damon Caldwell, her now husband, held her hand as they greeted guests. His smile was dazzling, polished, empty. The kind of smile a man could wear while plotting a merger or burying a secret. Selene's fingers tightened around her bouquet. The scent of the lilies suddenly made her nauseous. They had been together 5 years, long enough for her to memorize the rhythm of his breath, the way his voice dipped when he lied, the flicker in his eyes when he wanted to say more but didn't. She'd loved him. At least, she'd convinced herself she did. And for a while, maybe, it had been real. But lately, too many silences. Too many nights with him buried in his phone. Too many touches that felt like obligation, not affection. Still, she'd married him. Because sometimes women like her didn't walk away until the bruise wasn't metaphorical anymore. The crowd thinned as the night drew on. The toast had ended. The cake was sliced. Their future, supposedly, had begun. They returned to the bridal suite, an opulent room on the top floor of the Caldwell family estate, overlooking the dark sweep of the gardens. Selene unpinned her veil in front of the mirror. Damon came up behind her, his hands brushing her bare shoulders. His touch was soft, too soft. "Today was beautiful," he said. "It was," she answered, eyes meeting his in the mirror. He leaned down and kissed her neck. She didn't move. A slow silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of him unfastening his cufflinks, the rustle of her dress falling to the floor. Then, as they lay in the bed meant to begin forever, his lips close to her ear, Damon whispered, "Aria." Selene froze. Not a moan, not a murmur, not a mistake. A name. Soft, intimate, carried with the breath of a man haunted, and it wasn't hers. She didn't ask who Aria was. She didn't pull away, not yet. She lay still, her body betraying none of the chaos inside. She waited until his breath evened, until he drifted to sleep beside her like nothing had shattered. Then she rose. Silently, deliberately, she walked to the adjoining room where her suitcase still sat. She hadn't unpacked. She hadn't planned to. But now, the neat zip of the bag sounded like a declaration. Her dress lay in a heap on the floor. She left it there. She changed into a simple black sweater and jeans. No makeup, no jewels, no farewell note. Before she left, she opened the drawer of the mahogany desk and pulled out the envelope she'd never thought she'd need, the emergency plan. Her lawyer had insisted, just in case. She'd laughed when he handed it to her. Now she slid it onto the pillow next to Damon's head. Divorce papers, signed. When she opened the door to leave, she didn't look back. Not once. The elevator ride down was silent, but her heart was not. It thudded in her chest, not with heartbreak, but with clarity, with the cold certainty that she had married a man whose soul lived somewhere she would never reach. The driver blinked in confusion when she approached the car. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you?" "Take me to the airport," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Yes, ma'am." As the estate faded behind her, Selene closed her eyes. She had always imagined heartbreak would feel like drowning, but this felt like surfacing. Chapter 2, The Fallout. The news broke before the sun rose. Runaway bride or cold feet? Caldwell heiress Selene Reyes leaves husband on wedding night. Divorce papers on the pillow. Sources confirm split mere hours after wedding of the year. Who is Aria? Anonymous tip hints at love triangle behind Caldwell split. By the time Damon opened his eyes, the world already knew he'd been abandoned. The bedroom was empty, the bed beside him was cold, and the envelope beside his head was a silent, brutal punctuation mark at the end of the fairy tale. He called her phone. No answer. He called her best friend, her father, her lawyer. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Even the family estate staff only offered blank looks and tight-lipped shrugs. Selene had vanished like mist, leaving only confusion and scandal in her wake. 300 miles away, Selene Reyes stood barefoot in the kitchen of a weathered seaside cottage. the ocean hissing gently outside the window like it was guarding her secret. The air smelled of salt and lemons. The paint on the window frames peeled in delicate strips. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't grand. It was peace. She set down her coffee, opened the notebook she'd bought at a small coastal bookshop the day before, and began to write. Journal entry, day 1. I'm not heartbroken. I know I should be. He was supposed to be everything, but all I feel is quiet. Not numb, not in denial, just done. I didn't lose anything. I just saw the truth before I lost more. He whispered her name like it meant something holy, like I was never in the room, like I was never enough. Aria, who are you? Selene didn't cry. Not when she saw the headlines. Not when her mother called 16 times in a row and left voicemails alternating between devastation and rage. Not when she opened the email from her PR manager and saw the flurry of press statements they wanted to release on her behalf. She replied with a single sentence, I have nothing to say. She turned off her phone. Let the world choke on gossip. Journal entry, day 3, Fry. Damon is trying to reach me. I know because my lawyer sent a photo. He tried to hand-deliver a rewritten prenup to make things right. He thinks this was about money, or maybe a moment of panic. He doesn't understand that once a woman sees through a man, she can't unsee it. He said Aria like it was still her, like she was still alive in his memory, and I was a placeholder. It wasn't a slip. It was a confession. Selene walked the coastline every morning. She learned the locals didn't recognize her face without the designer makeup and heels. Here, she was just Elle, a quiet woman renting the cottage at the edge of town. A retired bookseller named Margaret waved to her each morning. The young man who ran the coffee shop always added an extra pastry to her order without comment. No one asked questions. No one knew who she'd been. And for the first time in years, Selene could breathe. But still, the name Aria haunted her. Not like a rival, not like a threat, more like a shadow that stretched back further than she could see. Journal entry 6. I had a dream. There was music, soft piano, and someone was crying. Not me, a woman. Her voice echoed with desperation. She said, please don't let them bury me. And then she vanished. I woke up with her name in my mouth. Aria. I don't believe in ghosts, but this doesn't feel like a fling. It feels like a grave. On the 7th day, Selene opened the suitcase she hadn't touched since arriving. At the bottom, tucked between layers of silken lingerie and formal shoes she would never wear again, was Damon's jacket. She stared at it for a long time, then picked it up, pressing her fingers into the lining as if trying to squeeze out whatever secrets it held. And there it was, a photograph, crumpled and half-torn, slipped between the inner seams of the jacket pocket. A woman, early 20s, laughing. Her eyes luminous, her hand resting gently on Damon's chest. Aria. The back of the photo had a date, 5 years ago. Selene's heart didn't pound, her hands didn't shake, because deep down she already knew. This wasn't just a name whispered in a half-asleep daze. This was a ghost story. And Damon wasn't just guilty of betrayal. He was hiding something far, far worse. Chapter 3. The Ghost of Aria. The photo sat on the table like a time bomb. Selene hadn't touched it since pulling it from Damon's jacket. It remained curled slightly at the edges, like even it didn't want to be seen too long. But every time she passed the kitchen, her eyes were drawn to it. Aria. She looked nothing like Selene. Her features were softer, more ethereal. Her laugh, frozen in still life, seemed to leap off the photo, unburdened and wild. But the way she touched Damon, that was the tell. It wasn't casual. It wasn't flirtation. It was intimacy, familiarity, trust. Selene sat down, pulled the photo closer, and flipped it over again. April 17th, 2020. 5 years ago. That date gnawed at something in her brain. She and Damon had met in late 2020 at a gala fundraiser hosted by his family. He'd been suave, reserved, magnetic, but always slightly polished. Like a man with a filter over his heart. Now she wondered if that filter had been grief or guilt. The next morning, Selene walked to the only library in town, a small sun-drenched brick building with crooked shelves and a helpful, impossibly nosy librarian named Bev. She started simple. Aria plus Caldwell plus 2020 disappearance. Nothing. She tried again. Woman missing April 2020 Caldwell Foundation Gala. Still nothing. She was about to give up when a buried local news blog popped up. The headline was vague, the article messier. Aspiring pianist disappears after benefit concert, no foul play suspected. The name, Aria Stanton. The date, April 18, 2020. The day after the photo. Selene leaned in, scanning the short article. Aria Stanton, 23, disappeared from her shared apartment after performing at a private benefit concert hosted by the Caldwell Foundation. Roommates reported her missing 2 days later. Her piano was left behind, as were her personal belongings. Police say there is no evidence of a crime. Stanton had no known family. No follow-up articles, no developments, no case reopened. Aria had vanished, and the world had politely forgotten. Selene printed the article. Then, with shaking hands, she opened a new search. Aria Stanton plus Damon Caldwell. Nothing. Not one official link. But her gut screamed otherwise. Journal entry, day 9. She vanished the day after being with him. That laugh in the photo, that joy, it didn't look like a woman planning to leave everything behind. So why was she gone? Why did no one look for her? Why is Damon's name nowhere near hers? Unless someone made sure it wasn't. Later that evening, Selene returned to the photo. This time, she studied the background. It wasn't a gala. It wasn't some romantic hideaway. It was a rehearsal space. A narrow, shadowed room with a worn piano and mismatched chairs. She recognized it instantly. It was in one of the lesser-known wings of the Caldwell Cultural Center. Damon's family had sponsored it for underprivileged artists, and they'd kept it conveniently out of public record. She knew because she'd once asked to use it for a youth charity event, and Damon had hesitated, told her it was closed for renovation. That had been a year ago. Had he been hiding more than a memory? The next day, Selene returned to the library. Bev was chatting with another patron, but perked up as Selene approached. "You again," Bev smiled. "Found what you were looking for." Selene hesitated. "Actually, have you ever heard of a girl named Aria Stanton?" Bev blinked. "That name sounds familiar. Give me a sec." She rummaged through a filing cabinet behind the desk. Yes, a literal filing cabinet, and returned with a faded yellow folder. "She used to play piano at the summer recitals," Bev said. "Beautiful music. Tragic girl. One of those quiet disappearances, you know?" Selene opened the folder and froze. Inside was a program from a youth concert, a candid of Aria at a piano, and a grainy photo of her in the Caldwell Foundation lobby. Standing with someone just out of frame. A man, too tall to be Damon, shoulders broader, but something about the posture, it felt familiar. Bev leaned over, tapping the edge of the photo. They said she was close to someone from the Caldwell family. Not Damon, the older one, I think. His brother, maybe? Always seemed like a cold one. Selene's heart stuttered. Damon had a brother, Lysander Caldwell, rarely in the spotlight, reclusive, quietly handled the family's legal arm behind the scenes. He'd spoken to Selene once, years ago. Brief, flat, like assessing a potential liability, not his future sister-in-law. She stared at the photo again, now sure. It wasn't Damon, it was Lysander. "I came here to escape a marriage, but I think I walked into a buried crime. Aria didn't leave. She vanished. And it wasn't just Damon, it was his family. The silence wasn't an accident. It was engineered." That night, Selene lay awake listening to the waves crash outside her window. The photo, the article, the program, all spread across her small desk. Damon hadn't just broken her heart. He'd been part of burying a woman. And Selene wasn't done until she knew why. Julian makes his first appearance, complex, gentle, and with his own shadows. The story continues to build tension while stirring new emotional undercurrents. Chapter 4, A Stranger's Kindness. It happened just past sunset on a winding coastal path. Selene had been walking too fast, her thoughts tangled and sharp, the wind tugging at her hair as if trying to pull her back to reason. She didn't see the uneven stone jutting from the path until her ankle twisted sharply beneath her and the world tilted sideways. Pain lanced through her leg. She hit the ground with a hard thud, palms scraping gravel. The breath rushed out of her, sharp and sudden. Then a voice, warm and steady, cut through the salt-thick air. "Don't move." A shadow knelt beside her. Strong hands, calloused and careful, hovered just shy of touching her ankle. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just checking to see if it's broken." Selene blinked up at him, breath catching. The man was in his early 30s, with wind-tossed dark hair and eyes the color of storm-washed sea glass, muted green, ringed with gray. There was paint on his fingers, a smear of blue across the collar of his flannel shirt. He smelled faintly of cedar and turpentine. "I'm fine," she said quickly, trying to sit up. "It's nothing." But when she put weight on her foot, pain shot up her leg and she stumbled. He caught her without hesitation. "Nothing," he said dryly, "has a funny way of making people fall over." His name was Julian Maris. He lived just outside town in a converted boathouse that now served as both home and art studio. He offered to walk Selene back to the cottage, but when he saw how hard she was trying not to limp, he simply said, "Let me help," and looped her arm around his shoulder. She hated how easily she let him. Not because he was charming, though he was, or handsome, though he was that too, but because something about him felt safe. And after everything, safety was terrifying. He helped her into the kitchen and grabbed a bag of frozen peas from her freezer like he'd lived there before. When she arched a brow at him, he just grinned. "Small town. Bev told me you'd rented the place. Said you were a quiet heart, hurting hard. Her words, not mine." Selene cracked a wry smile despite herself. "Of course she did." Julian crouched, gently pressing the peas to her ankle. "You gonna tell me what's got you pacing like a ghost every night, or is that just how you unwind?" She stiffened. He noticed, and he didn't push. "I used to be someone else," she said softly after a long pause. Julian didn't look up, just nodded. "Me too." Journal entry. Day 12, Julian is different. Not slick, not needy, not trying to fix me, just present. He listens without waiting to speak, and when I don't talk, he doesn't mind the silence. I don't want to like him, but some part of me is tired of bracing for the next betrayal. They spent more time together after that. Not intentionally, not planned. He brought her a small painting the next morning, an abstract swirl of blues and whites that looked like the sea in motion. No frame, no signature. "It reminded me of the way you walk," he said, shrugging, "like you're being chased by thoughts." Selene stared at it for a long time. No one had ever tried to capture her that way. Not even Damon. They talked more, sometimes about books, sometimes about nothing at all. She learned Julian had once been a rising name in the art world, had a studio in New York, lost someone, never said who. Now he painted in private, sold what he needed, lived simply, and watched people far more carefully than they realized. One afternoon, Selene hesitated, then pulled out the photo of Aria. "I need to ask you something." Julian's expression shifted the second he saw the picture. "You know her?" He took the photo from her slowly. His jaw tightened. "Yeah, I knew Aria." The words hit like a dropped stone. Selene leaned in. "How?" Julian sat back, rubbing a hand over his face. "We were in the same summer arts program when we were teenagers. She played piano. I painted. We shared a dorm for 3 months. She used to sneak out at night to play when the halls were quiet. Said music only told the truth when no one was listening." His voice went distant. She was luminous, but lonely, like she belonged to some other time. "What happened to her?" Selene asked. Julian looked at her then, really looked. "She disappeared, right after she got involved with someone rich, powerful. I always thought it was an accident, or that she ran." He handed the photo back. "But if you're asking questions about her now, maybe it was neither." Journal entry, day 13th. He knew her. Not just a name in a whisper, a real person. "The closer I get, the more I feel her story pressing against mine. And Julian feels like someone who would have tried to save her. I don't know why that makes me want to both cry and run." That night, Selene couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, Aria's laughter from the photo echoing in her ears, Julian's voice grounding her in the present. Two women, two timelines, and now, maybe, two truths ready to collide. Because Aria didn't just disappear. She was erased, and Selene was done letting ghosts be buried. End of part 1. Whispers and Wounds. Selene walked away from a man who shattered her on their wedding night and found more than just escape. She found questions that shouldn't exist, a stranger who sees past her scars, and the ghost of a woman whose truth might unravel everything. But this story isn't over, because the deeper Selene digs, the more dangerous the truth becomes. Part 2, Lies and Light, is coming soon. Make sure to subscribe or bookmark to continue this slow burn romance mystery full of emotional twists, suspense, and second chances built from strength, not forgiveness. Secrets have surfaced, but what lies beneath is even darker. Stay tuned.